Thank you for joining us today. We're going to look at the different options for connecting websites to Salesforce. Probably going to only take about half an hour. Depends if people have questions. Feel free to ask questions at any point. I don't mind being interrupted. I kind of like it. But if you also want to ask questions at the end, there'll be time for that as well. So fairly open on how we want to do it. The agenda, so we're going to run through a bit of an introduction, look at broken it down into 4 sections really to consider for that connection. A bit about us, we're Resonant. We've been around since 2015. We've completed over 250 Salesforce implementations to date. And we also have a division of Resonant Digital Solutions where we do full web design, web build, and connections through to Salesforce. That's something that we've developed over the past couple of years, and we probably do consider that we are now a full digital agency and have capability across all areas. Marketing, digital marketing as well. So this is the opening statement is what is this webinar about? As a digital agency, as a Salesforce implementation partner, we consider the website the front end. It is the customer's front end to your CRM. If you're interacting with a customer digitally, driving people to a website, capturing that information into your CRM. Okay, and it's making sure that connection is as good as it can be and appropriate for the size of the business as well, and looking at those solutions. So jumping straight in, the first method for connecting the website into Salesforce is by using forms. A simple form isn't as simple as we think. There's different capabilities of how you want your form on your website to actually behave. The simplest is most definitely a web to lead or a web to case form. That can be produced in Salesforce within a matter of minutes, and Salesforce itself can generate flat HTML with no design that can then be given to a web developer who can apply CSS and styling. It's the simplest piece for connecting into Salesforce. A step up from there, you could consider form assembly. It's a tool we're using a lot. It's a good option if you want to have complex data capture points. So you can have dependent fields and sections and decision trees based on the answers that are given by a user. There are other forms to form assembly that do the same thing. I guess form assembly is our fallback for being the next step on, being reliable and stable. We never see any issues with it and good support. And a level up from there may be a Pardot form, the next step up. So this allows you the ability to add in a bit more logic, progressive profiling. So the first time somebody comes to the website, they may give you their name, first name, last name, and company. The next time they may give you their job title. So the form will know the information that you've already captured and gradually gain more and more information about that person as they're interacting with the content on the website. A next piece then, if we move on, would be looking at complexity around force.com sites. These are quite a hidden treasure in the world of Salesforce. A lot of customers don't know that these things exist, and it is the actual ability to build in a website effectively within Salesforce. You actually can control the content of the page from within Salesforce. So it's a mixture of different code, and it is purely code. So it's not like building a website in WordPress, which has as a content management system and tables. It does have to be built out from scratch, but it gives you the ability to build journeys, customer journeys, as you're going through. In this instance, on this screen that we've got up, would be a journey for a booking an event, and this is one that we have built. So if you're taking a customer through a booking experience, we're going to capture information on the first page around who is making a booking, and that information is immediately captured into Salesforce. So we have a concept of empty carts. If people are sort of going through stages of interacting, of making a booking. You're capturing bits of information. We're going to capture that and create a lead in Salesforce straight away. Then they may go on to another page where they start entering the details of that booking. So for this events page that's in there, it could be the people who are going to be attending a course, and then the next page would be into summary and payment. So if somebody doesn't complete a payment, we've still captured the people who are interested in attending, so we can then actually put them on a marketing journey for the future. So it's the same as an abandoned cart or an empty cart in sort of a Shopify environment, but it's actually capturing it straight into Salesforce. It's also the content can be driven from information within Salesforce. So I think for StreamTech, we have an object which is called an event or a course that has all the information about it. So that'll be the location, the start times, end times, course content. All of that is data that's saved within Salesforce and then actually pushed onto the website. In this case, it's a good example. It's a website that we built. It's actually is a WordPress website, and I'll bring it up now. And if we actually look at some of the schedules and some of the bookings, so if we click into the virtual classroom for a course, we suddenly see that the URL changes to .force.com, and we're actually are now operating within Salesforce. So we've gone from being in a WordPress website, which is this page, to actually now entering into Salesforce, and we can now fill out details through the actual course booking process. Okay. Are there any questions around that? We do have a question from Alexandra. And yep, so can force.com sites be used for registration forms instead of form assembly? Absolutely, they can be. The consideration there's two considerations actually, and it's a common example in Salesforce is, do you want to incur an ongoing cost? So form assembly would have an ongoing cost monthly as a subscription, whereas with a force.com site, there's no ongoing subscription because it's included within your Salesforce subscription. So there's no ongoing additional subscription. But also, so that's a plus and a minus. It depends if you want an ongoing cost or you want a no ongoing cost. But if you go with a force.com site, it's a much bigger build because it's something that has to be coded from scratch. It's therefore, if you're coding something, it's harder to change in the future. Whereas with a form assembly page, it would just be a click and drag and drop, clicking around to make changes to the forms that you want at any time. The next thing is, can you have a WordPress and a force.com site? Absolutely. That's what we just looked at with StreamTech. So it's embedding links within a WordPress site so it knows when to jump into force.com. So we're merging those two things together. And unless you're looking at the URL, you don't really know the difference that's happening. It's a very common thing with Salesforce is thinking, okay, well, do I want to pay an ongoing subscription cost, or do I want to do more custom coding and more upfront development? There are some considerations around force.com sites though that we should be making, and that is around the security aspect. There has been quite a big change in force.com sites made in the last release, in the summer 2020 release, that the customer interacting with the force.com site is what's known as a guest user. Guest users are now no longer allowed to edit data within the system. So what we're looking at on that blank page is we're looking at the guest user is able to create records. That they used to be able to edit records at the same time. That's not allowed to happen anymore. So we actually manage that at the back end by creating records and updating things within the system so it works. But it is something that Salesforce is looking at enhancing and changing that security level at the moment, and it's worth considering before jumping into a force.com site. There may be further security changes coming with that solution. The next solution that we can consider would be straight into WordPress and a WordPress connector. So there's a plugin at the back end of WordPress. We actually moved into becoming a digital agency because we came across a number of different projects where web development agencies had tried to integrate to Salesforce and not understanding the data structure at the back end of WordPress had made it quite a confused and complex piece. There is a plugin at the back end of WordPress. It does do mapping from an object in Salesforce or a data table in Salesforce to a WordPress table. And using that, we're actually able to use Salesforce as a content management system, driving the interface with WordPress. So looking back at StreamTech being a WordPress website, it's a WordPress website that content is driven from Salesforce. So the actual course information is driven, the dates, etc. on this page, we're still in WordPress, but this whole page is driven by data from within the back end of Salesforce. Information is displayed there. So the plugin that we're using allows WordPress to really interact with Salesforce, and then you can apply any normal web design process on top of that. Any questions? Is that a question coming? Yep. And a question there from Marissa is this something that RCS or Resident Cloud Solutions needs to upkeep? No, it's once it's in place, effectively this is a open plugin for WordPress, so it doesn't necessarily need RCS at all. If it's having the capability and experience on the Salesforce side and on the WordPress side to use that plugin and get the outcome. Once it's in place, there's no additional support needed from any other solution or implementation that can be done. The plugin actually looks like it's got some quite a good support. It's been updated recently. That's one of the, every time you're using a plugin, is look at when it was last updated, look at the feedback, and that people are actually sort of interacting with it recently. Plugins that have not been touched or updated or reviewed, probably you've got a question. I think if there's going to be continual change on a form, then you shouldn't be coding it to start with. If it's a form that's going to change often, this is a set registration process, a set series of forms, which is unlikely to change. It does require a developer, a coder, to make changes to a Visualforce page, so that you could look at instead then at embedding, sort of going with a form assembly form for that registration piece, and embedding it into a WordPress website, which could still be could use the plugin and still give you the best of both worlds, so that you've got flexibility to change the forms but actually still have the content driven from within Salesforce. I think in this example, you want to be, if you're StreamTech and you want to be adding a new course, is you don't want to have to set the course up in Salesforce and then set the course up in the back end of WordPress. We can just do it from, once it's set up in Salesforce, it's automatically on the website. If those forms are going to change, then yeah, I'd probably look at using a form assembly form or a Pardot form to make it easier to change things and embed it. So the last option to talk about is probably the kind of the best of everything, the best of all solutions. Would be the actual using Salesforce communities. My Nick on Life is a community that's been around. We built about 3 years ago. Currently going through quite a big upgrade as well. Salesforce communities are a really powerful way to share the information from within Salesforce and use it as a true sort of content management system. Everything is done within the Salesforce setup. You get to set up, you assign profiles and roles as you would in a normal way, and define the access that everyone has to data within the system. They also do use guest users, and there are the security changes around guest users, but once somebody's logged in, they're considered a Salesforce user, and their roles and profiles and sharing rules control the information that people can see within there. They sit at both ends of the world, because actually they can be incredibly simple to set up and set up within a matter of hours if you're using a simple sharing rule, a simple user profile that's very closely managed matches somebody who's already in the system, and then using an out-of-the-box template. So partner communities are quite often used for that type of example, where you're partnering with an external company who are potentially making sales on your behalf, or maybe they're actually at the top end of the funnel. So you may have people logging in and creating leads, creating opportunities within the system, and a template can be set up within an hour or so to allow those people to access the system, set it up, and view the information within Salesforce already. You've got to then apply on top of that, start thinking, okay, well, can they see existing customers? How do we handle duplicates? If their partner is going to recommend somebody who's already within the system, we don't want to expose the internal information we have to that person. We're going to set up sharing rules around that, and that can all be managed on top. Templates have improved a lot over the past couple of years, and they do give you a certain amount of flexibility for how it's going to look, but at the end of the day, they are still a template. So they have a header, they have a footer, and we have columns in the middle of the page, and you can generally tell when you've done a few if you visit two different websites and they're both using Salesforce templates and communities, you can tell because they do look the same. So they don't give you a full design experience, fully customized design experience using a template, and you can therefore, on top of that, code any user experience that you're looking for. So you can have a fully customized user experience. It can match any brand experience that you're looking at. What that means again is you're playing off, okay, well, we want something that's really quick and easy to set up using partner communities and from Salesforce or a customer community. It can be a very quick setup, very limited upfront costs, but actually there's an ongoing subscription cost for those community licenses. Or we want to actually have a mixture of a website, a static website or a WordPress website, and then logging in to that community. We've got to balance out, okay, what's the actual user behavior going to be and how's it going to look? So that we are actually going to be doing a much more in-depth session on communities in about 3 weeks' time. On that, we will have one of our consultants, Esther, who's our most experienced communities expert, knows far more than I do. I know the theory at the top end to be able to answer any questions. But if there are any questions around communities at the moment, please do let me know. Karen's got one. Licensing costs can be quite high for communities if there are any users. Yes, it can be. Other recommendations for reducing licensing costs for more than 100 users? Not really. There's, the licensing costs are the licensing costs, but it's thinking about applying, or maybe the community is not the right way to go in that instance, because it could be something we could set up in a WordPress website and actually build it in that direction. But then you will be sacrificing the flexibilities, and the capabilities do change depending on the solution. And that's why we cover all of them, because we've got to choose the right solution for the right use case. Does WordPress have a portal similar to communities? Yes, that can be set up, and then you can control the information in the same way. So definitely you can create a login within WordPress. Somebody can create an account and log in. You definitely would find it much, much harder though, because the community will allow guest users or members to share information and interact in kind of, for want of a better word, the whole forums piece. That would be a lot harder to set up within WordPress and sync into Salesforce. So there are definitely options among all of these solutions to finding the right solution to meet the user case. We do a lot of communities because of that reason, that they are so flexible and we can do so much with them. And you just have to balance out the licensing costs and the outcome that you're looking for at that time as well. Any other questions? That's actually kind of that is the last piece to think of. Hopefully I've raised sort of a lot of the considerations for deciding on the correct solution. This slide, so these are kind of a summary table for thinking about, okay, well, which is the solution that I should use based on the option, the customization, the cost, and then what is the customer experience going to be at the end of it. So web to leads, definitely and web to case, definitely the sort of entry level. Is a low level of customization as long as you've got a web developer who can apply the CSS, the design aspects to it. So low cost. I mean, it literally can take 2 minutes to generate the HTML to create a form, which would then work. It just wouldn't look very pretty, but it's the simplest interface. And a good example of that is with a web to case form. The customer can't add attachments to a web to case form. So if you're asking somebody to create a case and you want photographic evidence of the issue or whatever the ticket is that they're logging, the case, then they can't add an attachment to that. You'd have to probably jump to a form assembly form. Pardot and form assembly, they go back and forth, I think, between which one you would use. Pardot obviously has a lot of other functionality that comes with it other than just forms, and you do have to pay the extra for that. Force.com sites, high level of customization, which does bring in it with a higher implementation cost, but there is no ongoing cost. There's no license cost with it. Communities, the customization could be, I mean, you could set it up within a day, but also we've got 5-month projects running on communities which are beautifully designed, and therefore I think the cost there should be low to high for customization and low to high, I guess, with license costs as well, but very advanced customer features. And WordPress plugin, it's definitely more work than it is to set up a community. The cost there can be mid to high. Mid probably because it doesn't have that licensing cost, but again, advanced customer experience. So that's kind of a summarizing the different thought processes. It's always weighing up subscription costs against customization costs, and the world of technology is all about plugging things together, so picking the right one and working through that process. If you've got any other questions that you'd like to ask offline, then please feel free to contact myself or Natalie. If you ask me, I may end up directing you to Natalie anyway for a lot of the really digital stuff.